Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 166. Today we are talking development approvals, what you need to know about your development approval. Bob's going to talk you through some scenarios where people assume that they're all good, what to look for, and we're just going to unpack it a bit, and you're going to leave this episode feeling quite educated on development approvals and development applications. There's a lot going on in this one. Let's jump on into episode 166. Hello and welcome to episode 166. We are talking development approvals, development applications, DAs. But before we do, Millionaires Exposed. The copy this week is going to Peter Gazdock. Peter Gazdock, this is in the post to you. Someone will reach out shortly. Thanks for the chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, now before we kick into this episode, I want to remind you that we have our 3-day property development workshop coming up on October 11, 12 and 13, and you are going to want to be there. Our events are amazing. We have heard on so many occasions that they are the best. So you really want to get there. If you want to learn property development from the master, 3 full days, fabulous networking, fabulous food. You don't bring your own to ours. It's all catered for. It's delicious. And we do so much hanging out with you the whole time that you are going to walk in an amateur and leave a blooming expert and love it. So if you're interested in that, we'll put a link below to our website. There's different packages if you've been before. I know the team's got a bit of a deal on at the moment. So go on over to our website. We'll click the link below to there and see what's available for you if you're wanting to come along. If property development is on your radar in the next 6 to 18 months, you're going to want to be there. It is a game changer. Anyway, Bob, let's talk all things DA.
DA.
Oh, so first of all, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
And we might look different today because we're doing this one first thing in the morning. Do we look? I think we look like we just woke up. For those of you who watch us on YouTube, hit subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. And write us a comment.
Yeah. Bob looks like he's asleep.
No,
he's not.
We just, maybe
he always looks that way.
It just feels a little bit kind of weird doing it the first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
We were lying in bed actually talking about this week's topic. And I said, what do you reckon? And we always talk about something that's come up with a conversation with people or students or someone I've talked to over the phone. And then we started getting into this deep conversation,
Yeah, the sun still hadn't risen.
No, it's like about 5:15 in the morning and we're talking about DAs.
But that's us.
Yeah, and I said, that'd actually make a really good podcast. So, yeah, should we just go and do it? Next thing, we're up and we're here. So good morning to those of you.
2 coffees later?
Yeah.
Here we are.
I did sink 2 coffees. Hey, just another thing, Bob, before we kick into it. What's your tip for the day?
Oh, well, I'll tell you a good tip.
Yeah?
Don't think that the weather app on your phone, in my case an Apple, don't think the weather app is accurate.
Yeah.
Because we took the covers off some of our furniture because it looks great. It's going to be sunny for a week. Put the washing out for a nice final air on the deck, and what happens? Wake up at about 4. I could hear a noise belting down rain. So, I guess it's not a tragedy. It'll sort itself out. Stuff dries out, but time and time again, I've come to realise that weather app is not so good.
You know what's crazy though? Because we live in Queensland, here we are, and singlet, you've just put a shirt on, you'll go back to a short sleeve shirt straight after this podcast.
And a pair of board shorts.
Yeah, just we chill out a bit. But the crazy thing is we talk to people or Zoom session with people all around Australia and sometimes people are wearing jackets and all sorts and you think,
funny.
We haven't had rain in so long, really, hey?
No.
I'm going to Melbourne on Saturday for a meeting and I kid you not, it's going to be 13 degrees. We've been
That's the maximum.
We've been having sort of 28s. So it's kind of a bit of a shock. I'm thinking,
will be a shock.
What am I going to wear? But anyway, less about that. Let's talk development approvals and development applications. And I'm sure by now everyone listening, and thank you to those who do, you know what they are.
Yeah, it's not about what they are. Just a few angles that some people really don't think about. They think of like the broad brush scenario of, what is the development approval and doing my feasibility and how does that all wrap up. But I think I'd just like to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Make a few things known.
Yes.
Tell me when I can.
Well, shall we start off with how it starts, Bob? You know, generally people are just off, they're going to go and buy themselves a house, aren't they?
Yeah, property, yeah. So so you're heading out to buy yourself a development site. What's the whole purpose of it?
To add value, to add.
Yeah.
One
yeah.
into two to three to four to five.
Yeah, obviously, to make money would be a good reason. But beyond that, what you're going to do, you're going to find a site that suits your purpose. So you might be looking at a little subdivision, perhaps duplex, maybe small townhouse development, whatever it is. So you've gone out there with a purpose. You've chosen your area. You've got to know it well. You know the sort of zoning you're looking for to do this duplex or townhouses. And you find one. It's zoned right, it's big enough, and you can bounce it off your town planner, which would be good, but you know you can do one. And so the first thing you do, of course, is you do your numbers, because it has to stack up. And as we all know, a lot of the deals we look at don't stack up and they end up in the rubbish bin.
I have to say though, we're having some good mentoring students are going for it, and we've got everyone's on the go. We've got a lot of development happening in our community, which is exciting.
In the last 4 to 6 weeks, so many of them have picked up deals.
Yeah.
Where it was harder previously.
Yeah.
But,
We're getting them, but it took longer.
It's
now
getting
it's like
easier.
They're in and they're in.
Definitely getting easier. Yeah. But back to this hypothetical, if you like. Let's just say, let's keep it simple. Could be a little 3-pack of townhouses. It doesn't really matter what it is. So it's zoned right. It's the right size. You check with the town planner, whatever. You know you can do 3 townhouses on it. And so you do your numbers. You do your feasibility. So you work out, what can they sell for? Normal feaso. And you put the land value. Let's say it's on the market, whatever the number is. You put that price in. You put in all your other costs. Council fees, your finance, your construction costs, all your bits and pieces. You have a look at it, and it makes sufficient profit.
You're like, yes.
The profit margin is good. It's fine, and you're going to get finance because it stacks up.
Yeah.
That's why.
I think there's a wee key there, and that's something that not everyone realises. There are things that I know from conversations that I have repetitively, is people don't realise that to get finance, it has to stack up. So that's number one tip here.
Yeah.
And you might think that makes sense, but a lot of people don't actually get that. They think, I'm going to make some money, but it has to reach a certain margin before a financier will finance it. So that's tip number one. It has to reach a particular margin, not just, it's going to make 50K.
It's up to the financier to decide if it's a deal or not. But we know how they look at it.
Yeah.
We know the sort of profit margins they want.
Yeah.
And so does your finance broker. So that's what we have to hit. And so you do your numbers. It all looks good. So now you're going to buy it. So what you're buying, in most cases, it's like an old house on a block of land, isn't it? The block of land's big enough, it's zoned okay for townhouses, but more often it's just a crappy old house, and you're going to knock it down. Now, sometimes the house might be in good nick, and your project might be that you can get down beside the house into the backyard and maybe do two new townhouses in the back, keep the one at the front, maybe a little bit of a reno, tidy it up. That could be the deal as well. It doesn't really matter. But most of the time, a lot of the time, we simply demolish the house. And so what we're really buying is an old house on a block of land.
Yeah.
So when you rock up for your finance, yes, you're looking at it as a development site that you're going to develop and make money out of. Financiers are really just looking at it as what it is. It doesn't have an approval. And with financiers, if it doesn't have an approval, it's not technically to them a development site. You're just buying an investment property. So you're buying an old house on a block of land. And that's okay. That's an investment purchase. So I think it's important to talk about the finance side of it, because that's going to sort of lead on to other things.
And finance is massive when it comes to property development.
Everything.
But it's also such a big component to understand it. It's one of those things that people just don't realise there's more to property developing than whacking a property on a site. Finance is a huge
It's the key.
part. Yeah, huge.
Very few people have enough cash lying around in an account to do your whole development for cash and not even borrow. So that's
And if you
extremely
do, ring me.
Yeah, come and talk to us.
I've got just the deal for you.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways you can go normally when you do finance. One's retail finance. Now, if you want to buy yourself a house, it's retail finance. You want to buy yourself an investment property, it's retail finance. That's the sort of finance you get from the banks. You see the banks around, often at big shopping centres. You know the banks. You probably go to one. They will lend you money to buy an investment property or a house. And there's 2 components that you need to get that finance. You've got to have a deposit, and you have to prove you can afford the interest every month. And that's called serviceability. So typically, that's what we call retail finance. Retail finance, deposit serviceability.
And remember, that's just for buying a house. You don't do that with development, which is the other conversation I have so many times. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just when you're buying a property that you're going to, like if you're an investor.
Yeah, an investment property or your own home. That's what you use.
Yeah.
And the banks love it. They love it because they lend you at a low interest rate. You might not think it's low because we've had such a holiday a few years ago.
Yeah.
But in the marketplace, they lend at low interest for a long period of time. That's how they make their money. They love to give you a 20 or 30-year loan at the current interest rate, whatever it is, and that's how they make their money.
They make truckloads.
Truckloads. And plus the fees.
Good.
They make more money out of fees than they do out of paying the margin on interest. But
they don't miss you on fees, that's for sure.
But property development's different, hey?
Yes.
Retail banks who would lend you money for your own home or investment property generally, nearly always, don't like lending on property developments.
Back in the day they used to, though, didn't they, Bob, initially?
Yeah,
100 years ago?
Pre-GFC, it wasn't too hard.
Yeah.
Post-GFC, and it's not just post-GFC that they pulled back on doing financing developments. It's also that they make so much money out of fees. If you go back 20 years ago, they made, I'm only making this up, let's say 80% of their money came from interest rate margins.
Yeah.
Now, more than 50%, I don't even know what it is, a lot of fees.
Yeah.
So they're not relying just on that interest rate margin between what they might pay to a depositor and what they lend at.
How do they get away with that?
Well, because you can.
It's only a rort if you're not involved. That old story.
I'd love to be a bank.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not complaining. But hey, we need banks. Imagine
Yes.
if there weren't banks and you had to rely on cash only. No one would own a house, no one would buy it. It'd be terrible. So, no, banks are okay. But remember this, they don't generally like doing property developments because they're lending at a low interest rate for a short period of time. Not a long period of time, a short period of time. And they really don't make enough out of that. But, however, within the banking system, I'm just talking about banks at the moment, there is the commercial arm of a bank. So every bank, whether it's one of the big four, one of the second-tier banks, doesn't matter, they all have a commercial division. And what that means is that commercial division in the bank, and you won't find them at the normal, bank at Westfield. They'll be in the head office in the city on the 20th floor or somewhere. You don't normally rock up to a bank's commercial division.
No.
You either get introduced or you get to know contacts in there. So what happens there is the commercial division of a bank lends on commercial finance. That could be purchasing a commercial investment, an industrial unit, little strip shops, big strip shops, any commercial, and they also lend on development. However, they make their money by lending at a higher interest rate. So property development, look, it could be, a small development could be 12 months to 2 years. It's a short period of time. That's why the retail banks don't like it. But with the commercial banks, they make up for it by lending at a higher interest rate and charging an application fee.
Yeah, those there you go. They get you on that fee again. What are we looking at the moment? So we are in September 24.
Yeah, they've all got different ways of calculating.
Oh, yeah.
It could be the 90-day bank bill rate plus a margin. But look, it's probably running out at about 2.5% roughly above the retail rate.
Okay.
Thereabouts.
That's not so bad.
Give or take a bit.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But they are okay to lend on property development. The problem's this. With banks, the commercial divisions, since the GFC, they pulled back a lot on their lending on property development. And they tend to lend to developers who have a long track record with them, long-term customers, and they really want to do larger projects. So I know somebody the other day who spoke to a bank about a commercial loan for development, and they said, well, we only lend 10 million and above. And they wanted like 3 million. No chance there. So what's happened in the marketplace is that most property development finance these days is not done by the banks, not even the commercial arm of the bank. It's done by what we call non-banks. And they charge a bit more for their application fee, they charge a bit more for their interest.
You could almost use the word they charge like wounded bulls. Well, it's worth it, but some of their fees are a bit hefty. They can be.
They can be, and it can vary a lot from financier to financier.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is this, they lend money.
Yes.
And so if you're relying on a bank on a small project, a bank only, you might be disappointed.
Yeah.
Whereas at least the non-banks will lend. Yeah, they're a bit more expensive, but they lend you more money than a bank does.
And it means that you can do a development as opposed to not doing one.
Yeah. And so they'll lend you more money than a bank would because they lend at a higher loan-to-value ratio, which means the more money they give you, the less you put in. So you can get into a project with less money, with less equity. And so if you're talking about your profit might be reduced a little bit by the higher finance costs, but you're putting less money in. Therefore, if you're comparing your profit to the amount of money you put in, and it can actually be a better return on your capital. Anyway, that's another story. This is not about finance today.
And for some people, their heads just went, what, Bob? Oh my gosh, I hope we got most of you there. I get what he's saying. I hope everyone else does.
Now, the reason I'm saying it's this. When you buy what you call a development site, which is something we can do this hypothetical 3 townhouse development on that doesn't have a development permit at the moment, financiers are going to look at that as an investment purchase. And so that's okay. Now, one thing I didn't mention about commercial finance, which you know is the big difference, is what?
Is that you don't have to service it.
Yeah,
So
it's capitalised.
It's capitalised. They loan you the interest as well. And I talk to so many people about this and they're like, what? So you don't have to service the loan. So it's great for people who are currently tapped
You don't
out.
have to prove serviceability.
Yeah, tapped out because they've got too many investment properties and they can't move forward. This is your way forward, people.
Yeah, and that's the way property development generally is. It's what we call capitalised interest, as Hilary just said. So what they do, they have a look at the feasibility, they work out how much interest is in this project, they then lend it to you. It's part of your loan.
How good's that?
So instead of having every month to, look in your back pocket and see if you've got any money, it's already taken care of. It's in the loan. It's capitalised into the loan. And then what they do is they quarantine that. Let's say it was 200,000 interest on the project. They quarantine that 200,000 out to one side. It's part of the loan. And then every month, let's say when the financier is due to be paid, and let's say this month they're due to be paid $10,000 interest, they put their hand into the interest cap, the 200,000, pull out their 10,000, whatever it is, and pay themselves. And that goes on throughout the whole project. So you don't
It's
have to
almost
find
absurd, isn't it? It's like they put
But
it over
nothing
there.
would happen if you didn't do that.
Oh, I know, but it's crazy. They loan you it, they keep it separate from your money, and then they just take it back. So it means that you can move forward.
But if developers had to rely on serviceability to do projects, hardly any would get done.
No.
You'd only have the big public companies that could even afford to do one. So it's a good thing, and that's a huge difference between commercial finance and retail. But back to the point in question today, you buy a site, so you're doing your feasibility, it looks good.
Oh, hang on, before that, you do your due diligence. Your due diligence is done, so you know it can be done.
Yeah, you've looked at it, you know that it's the right zoning, the right size, you know you can fit 3 on, you know that you can connect your sewer and your water and everything's sweet. You do your numbers and it stacks up and you go ahead and buy it.
You know what the market wants. All that stuff's done.
Yeah. Whatever you do, you buy it. And then what do you do then? Well, after you buy it, you get your development permit. So that's what we're talking about. So, on this hypothetical 3 townhouse project, you get the site surveyed. Survey goes to the architect. Architect does his design. He works closely with the town planner. There might be a civil engineer, might not be, say something in there. Landscape architect. Bing, bing. Through the council, you get your development permit.
Woohoo! Happy days.
That's good. It's always a time for celebration. But you can't start building yet.
No.
Because you've got to get your building approval or your building permit, or in some states it might be called a construction certificate. So then, once again, architect back, detail design, all the other stuff, pulls in the other consultants. Then you get your, I'll call it a building permit at this point. So you've got both your approvals that you need. And now you're ready to go to the market, get a builder and build it. Build it, sell it. That's where the money is at the end. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. This is where you find out, was your feasibility correct?
Have you, done everything correctly?
Your feasibility that you did on this whole project to decide whether you're going to do it or not had nothing to do when you purchased it. You just, as far as the finance is concerned, you're just buying an old house on a block of land. The value of value is that old house on a block of land, and you buy it, and that's that.
This is a whole new ball game
Nobody's
now.
looking at the feasibility because it's not relevant.
The only person who looked at that point was you. Because you know that it works, because you've done everything correctly. And like Bob's throwing it out, then you do this, this and this. And for some of you thinking, oh yeah, I can do that. Each of those steps has 400 steps. There's a lot to do in there.
So now we're up to the point where we're fully approved. Now we want to go on and build it. It's at that point that we usually need some more money, because we put enough money, equity if you like, into the first place. Finance at the time lent us the rest of the money. We bought it. We've got now approvals.
And because it's not a $10 million project, you can't get your commercial from the bank, so you go to your financier.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a non-bank finance.
Yep.
As 80% of finance is at the moment on development. And so you reach the construction stage basically. Now what typically happens here is you need more money to build it. And because you need more money, you generally have to tip in a bit more of your own, and the financier will tip in the rest. Now, there's a little bit of finance here because I have to say this to explain what we're doing.
And this is not advice.
The financier who lends you now more money to build it could be the same financier that you used to purchase the site in the first place, but doesn't have to be. In fact, in more cases than not,
It won't be.
it'll be a specialist construction financier now. And so this is another financier now who will lend you the money for two things. They'll lend you the money to pay the loan out to the first financier.
So that's gone now.
Because you only ever have one financier in the deal because they want a first mortgage.
And if you
As
had
security.
two, you got one with a first mortgage and one with a second, so that won't happen.
No. So, well, not in this case. So whether it's the same financier now lends you more money to develop, to construct, or whether it's a different, like a construction type financier who comes in and pays the other one out, doesn't really matter. You tip in a bit more money at this point, probably, and get the rest of the money, build it, and sell it.
Perfect. Sounds perfect, Bob. All good to go. Now, here's the big bit.
Well, the bit is here. To get the rest of that money, to get that construction money, the deal now has to stack up.
Yeah, this is when it matters the most.
This is where the feasibility matters. This is where it needs to stack up. The feasibility didn't matter for finance back at the beginning because the financier is just lending you money on an old house on a block of land.
It did matter to you, though, because you
mattered
needed
to
to
you.
know that it was going to work. So this is when the rubber meets the road, like you said.
Yeah.
So you knew it worked in your head, and you went to the bank and you bought a property, and that's all good. Now to get finance to do the rest of it and pay back the bank and move forward for your development.
Yeah, we're not talking about banks anymore.
This is when it really matters that your feasibility was correct.
And look, this is a certain amount of time down the track. So when you first did your feasibility, would have been just before you signed a contract to purchase. And since you've signed the contract, you've then gone on and settled. Could be 30, 60 days probably. Then you've got your development permit, then you've got your building permit, let's say, DA. So there's a certain amount of time. I can't tell you how long that is because it depends on a lot of variables. It can depend even on what state you are. Some states are slower. It depends how busy the council is. Depends on how complex your project is. Depends on how fast your consultants are. I mean, there's a lot of
Variables, yeah.
But look, it could be, I'll pluck a figure out of nowhere. It could be 9 months down the track, right?
Yep.
So 9 months down the track, now your feasibility matters to somebody else other than you. And it's the financier.
Other than you and your wife or your husband and your mum and your family. Now it matters to everyone.
Yeah. So what happens now is your financier, the one you're likely to use, and you're probably working with a finance broker at this point until you're experienced enough to know a lot of financiers personally. And so the broker finds the best financier for you at the moment. And then what happens? Well, financiers are exactly that. They're financiers. And they need to know that they're going to lend money into a good deal. And what that means is the deal has to stack up. That's what you talked about before. It doesn't matter to you how much profit you want to make. It just has to make enough profit for the financier to do the deal.
And we'll just say that again because it does matter to you because you want to make profit. But in a lot of people's mind, and especially newer property developers, the idea is, well, I'm going to make some money, so that's okay. I don't even care if it's only 100,000 or 150,000. But if that's not enough, if there's not enough fat in that, well, then the financier is not going to be a happy chappy and you won't get the finance.
So it has to stack up for the financier, and they'll have certain parameters. Typically in commercial real estate, it's what we call the return on cost or the margin on cost, which is your profit expressed as a percentage of your total cost. That's certainly one of the indicators that they use. So how do they do that? Well, they appoint a commercial valuer at this point. Now, the commercial valuer, she's asked to go out there and do a proper feasibility on the project. They'll have a look at what they think these 3 townhouses can sell for, and they do that by comparative analysis. They'll go and look at other townhouses in the area that are similar that have sold recently, and they'll use that as their benchmark for saying this is what they'll sell for.
And really, it depends on their experience as well, doesn't it, Bob? Because we can have valuers that we don't always agree with, and we've had that happen. We've had a disagreement with it. Not disagreement, but evaluation. We're like, actually, that's not correct.
Not very often, though.
No, not very often.
Because you've got 2 levels of valuers.
Yeah.
Once again, you've got what we call a retail valuer, and they value houses and investment properties and that sort of thing. Then you've got commercial valuers who have more experience, more education, and are used to valuing much more complex things like developments shopping centres, all that sort of stuff. So they're a much higher level than a retail valuer. And I can tell you, retail valuers can be hit and miss, but commercial valuers generally are pretty good. I've rarely had a problem, only very occasionally, with a commercial valuer getting it wrong. And that's rare. So this commercial valuer will now do the feasibility. He'll work out what these things sell for, and he'll have a look at all the costs. And
will you also look at your feasibility, Bob?
Yeah.
So that's why it is important that you
he might
have
not
it.
agree with it, but he'll look at it.
Yeah. A comprehensive feasibility is important because that makes them look and realise that you've done the work for this, hey?
Yeah. And look, in our course, I probably spend an hour talking about just that bit. But
we don't
have an hour today.
But we've also got the feasibility calculator and an hour's tutorial on how to use it as well. So, there is... Yeah. It is important to get that right just for this point here. And this is such a big point in your development, isn't it? It's kind of a nervous point. A little.
Yeah. In a perfect world, you got a feasibility that stacks up. What you want the valuer to do is to agree with your feasibility. That's what you want. So you have to use real numbers, of course. But this is what happens. The financier says, look, okay, I'm sending my valuer out there. So the valuer would be on the panel of the financier. You actually pay for it, but it doesn't matter. They do their own feasibility. And yes, certainly you give them yours with all your costs and everything, but they'll do it then. And so what happens, if you've done everything right, they should agree with you, which is nearly always the case. So you want them to agree with you. But this is what matters. It's the valuer's valuation. It's the valuer's feasibility that matters, because that's the one that the financier will accept, and you want the money from the financier. And this is where it can unravel. So I've taken quite a lot of time to get to this point.
I think good, though. People need to understand this stuff. This is understanding stuff.
Yeah. So the feasibility you did 9 or 10 months ago before you bought it is relevant to you, but now this is where it really matters. And let's say you got it wrong. Let's say you overestimated what they might sell for. You
underestimated the construction.
Underestimated the construction cost, or simply left a bunch of costs out. That would make your feasibility back at the beginning when you did it look a lot better than reality than it really is, and you based your purchase on that, and there was nobody to pick you up at the time because that feasibility was only relevant to you. The lender just lent on the old house on a block of land. Now it really matters. And I've seen people who stuffed up their feasibility at the beginning, but they never know until now, 9 or 10 months down the track, that it was all wrong. And in some cases, they can't get finance because they stuffed it up. And yes, look, I know markets can change in that 9 months. They can go backwards a bit, which will work against you, but they can go up a bit, which will work for you. And markets tend to go more up for a longer period than they go down, because properties go up in value, so obviously they go up more than they go down. But in that 9 months, it can work against you.
That's fairly rare, but it does happen.
It can happen, yeah, sure. But more often than not, it'll actually go the other way, which can help you, which would be good, because you might need help.
And that's saved so many people. There are so many property developers out there that have just been saved by that.
Well, we saw that in 2021 when the values went up through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
And before the increase in build costs had actually really bitten, and people that had bought dud sites, all of a sudden they work and save their life.
Now they're educators.
They don't realise that now.
Can I say? And now they're out there as coaches.
That's another story. Yeah, somebody who is out there educating on property development really smashed up 3 projects by getting it wrong at the beginning. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
It's all about getting it right at the beginning, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Get it right at the beginning, you're right.
Yeah. These are just fundamentals.
So what I'm saying here is, this is where it really matters, your feasibility. This is where it needs to be right. And people who bought a lemon at the beginning because they didn't do their feasibility correctly, this is where it really matters, because that lemon is not going to stack up. The valuer will get it right. He says, look, it doesn't make enough profit. Look, your expectation of what these will sell for is too high. The build cost. And what happens now, when a valuer does his valuation, and obviously a big component of the costs is the construction price, he'll ask you, the developer, to get quotes from a builder, and he'll rely on those. And the problem is, that's where a lot of people fall apart, like the person I just mentioned before, is that in their original feasibility, in somebody's original feasibility, they got the build costs really low. They just got it wrong, made the deal look a lot better. And so they didn't know until they're almost up to the construction stage, and they start, once they got their building permit, now they've got some plans, now some builders can look at it and quote, and it's come in way higher than they ever estimated. And that just kills the deal. And so it's not going to stack up, and you're not going to get the money. And what I'm saying is a lot of people don't know until then that it's you're not going to get the money, it's stuffed. Because they got it wrong in the first place.
So that's what we refer to at Property Mastermind, and Bob's done this for years. You probably heard it here
Quack,
first.
quack.
It's a wood duck. That's what we call a wood duck. Somebody who just doesn't really know what they're doing and they move forward. So Bob, what does that wood duck then have to do when he finds out he can't get finance because he cooked his feasibility at the start and the value was valued at too low and the financier just ain't financing it? Then what does the wood duck have to do?
Well, there's only two things you can do: keep it or sell it. So let's have a look at that. If you keep it, it's basically an investment property now, and probably not a very good house, so not a great renter. And so you're going to cop some pain for a while and hope that the market moves up to a point where sale prices move up enough so that the feasibility works and you get the money. That could take a while. It depends. I mean, sometimes we've seen prices jump quickly. Sometimes they just do nothing and remain static. So it's a bit of a...
And that depends on how much... You know, if you're in the game on this one with a lot and you're paying a truckload of interest and it's pain, then your other option is you can't hold, because not everyone can.
No, I'm not saying it's even the best thing to do.
No.
But that is an option.
It's the highest and best use of your money at this point.
Yeah. So then the question is, if they sell it,
Yep.
they can't sell it as a development site because it doesn't stack up. So you either got to sell it to another wood duck.
No, as a development site to a wood duck who doesn't know what they're doing.
Oh, no, I've seen that happen.
You've got to go on a wood duck hunt.
You can have two wood ducks in the same deal. The first one
Yeah, I've seen
buys
it
a
too.
lemon and then sells the lemon to another wood duck.
Yeah.
It can happen, but there's
Lemons
only
and
so
wood
many
ducks.
wood ducks.
Yeah.
So you probably can't sell it as a development site, although they often try. So often when you see a site, not often, no, well, a certain amount of the time, when you see a development site on the market that has a DA, some of those times it's the wood duck who got it wrong. Or just somebody who thinks the thing's worth a heap of money because you got a DA, and that's not the case. So talking about selling it, more than likely, you just have to sell it as an old investment property. So the point is, what's it worth as a house now? You're probably not going to sell it. If you can't find a wood duck, you're not going to sell it as a site. So can you sell it as a house? And what's the difference? How much of a bath do you take? And that's one thing. That's if you sell it. The other thing is, that's if you keep it. You're either keeping it or selling it.
Yep.
You're keeping it, generally not the way to go, because it's going to cost you a lot of money before it ever turns around and becomes profitable. You're probably going to have to sell.
And I have to say, how many people have joined our mentoring program? They've gone and bought themselves a site, and they go, right, now I need to go and join the mentoring program. And even in the last couple of years, we've had people join, and it's been, you're going to have to sell it. It doesn't stack up. We have had a few of those.
Yeah.
That's why we always say, don't buy the site before coming to talk to us, because if you don't know what you don't know, you get stuck. You can't make it happen.
No,
and then you're a wood duck with a lemon looking for another wood duck. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So selling it, find another wood duck, or perhaps sell it at a loss. But sometimes you're better off selling something at a loss to get yourself out and just clean the decks, learn from it, and move on.
Yeah.
But the point is, don't buy the lemon in the first place, and you don't have to. There's ways where you don't have to. It's often people that are just uneducated, ill-educated. You know the people.
Yeah, just it's ego driven, it's emotionally driven, they're just in a rush that is trying to cut. What's the word you used the other day? The deal we just pulled out of something because the other side was a bit incompetent, and they, instead of getting real lawyers, they got conveyances and all sorts of things. They were just trying to save 5 cents. What was the term you used?
Oh, incompetence.
No, but you said so they try and save 5 cents, but it ends up costing.
They'll lose $1 to make 5 cents.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what it was. Not knowing what they were doing, and we walked away from a deal because we're like, no, and just too risky and not worth
it. The deal itself was okay, but the seller and their team and them, they're just totally incompetent.
Those particular developers that we were buying the land from.
We got
too hard.
Just go straight to the other deal.
Yeah,
which we did.
So it's knowing when to walk away, and I think those people that wood ducks that do buy don't know when it's time to walk away.
Yeah, so that's a position you don't want to be in.
No. And
I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you get your feasibility wrong right at the beginning, just before you purchase the site, it won't really come home to roost until the construction stage, where an expert, like a valuer, commercial valuer for a bank, actually proves you're all wrong. Or you find out you're wrong yourself when you see, well, I allowed so much for construction and I'm way too low, and now this deal doesn't stack up.
So, Bob, you actually brought up before that, like, people getting a wrong DA. So that's just if you were getting your own DA. Okay, so let's park that now.
Okay.
So, Bob, what would be your parting advice on this one today on DAs and numbers and everything we've gone through?
Yeah.
What's your wisdom?
Well,
40 years later, what would you tell us?
You have to get your feasibility right at the beginning, but you're not going to know if you've done it wrong. If you did do it wrong, you're not going to know probably until the construction stage, where the financier's valuer comes good.
Oh my gosh, I've got a feeling my phone's going to be ringing and going mad.
So the solution to that is get it right in the first place. If you get it right in the first place, you should be fine at the construction stage, and everything's good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's quite a lag between the two. If you get it wrong, you're not going to know for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've spent more money. And you spent money on development permits, building permits, before you ever know you got it wrong in the first place. Solution, don't get it wrong in the first place. Get it right. Learn how to do it. Do it correctly, and you'll be okay.
Well, folks, we know we've probably taught some of you some valuable stuff here, and we're going to carry on this DA conversation in our next episode, where we're going to talk about purchasing sites with DAs, making sure that you're not a wood duck purchasing from another wood duck, a lemon. All right, we'll look forward to talking to you next week. Bye for now.
Bye now.